मॅडम.
हेलो हेलो.
या
अरे बाबा, अरे आवाज काहीच येत नाहीये मला.
आपका आवाज आ रहा है, प्लीज कंटिन्यू.
मला पण आवाज नाही येत आहे तुमचा तिकडनं, काहीच आवाज येत नाहीये.
मॅडम तुमचा आवाज येतो, ऐकू. हॅलो.
येतोय?
हा, तुमचा आवाज येतोय.
तुम्ही
चालू करा.
बोलायला. हा, स्लाइड दिसत आहे फक्त. आता मी ठीक. ओके, ठीक. थँक्यू. Good morning, all the delegates who are present here. I hope that I am audible to all of you. At the outset, let me thank the organizer of this conference for giving me an opportunity to speak on Mental Health Care Act 2017 and its implementation in Maharashtra. I'm also, please accept my apology also because I joined little late and inconvenience caused by that. Sorry for that. There are many questions regarding the implementation of this Mental Health Care Act in Maharashtra. And let me tell you that the government is in कोर्टाच्या कटघऱ्यात, ज्याला आपण म्हणतो. तर so the government is standing there right now regarding this Mental Health Care Act. But friends, let me tell you that we are not neglecting this act, but we are in the process of implementing this act. What are the facts? I will let you know. So we all know that the Mental Health Care Act 2017 was enacted on 7th April 17 and it came into force on 29th May 18. Mental Health Care Act 17 provides the right-based approach to persons with mental illness. It provides mental health care services to persons with mental illnesses. And it protects, promotes, and fulfills the rights of persons with mental illness during delivery of mental health care services. And this is the basic of this act. Next, please. The short background of this act is that the United Nations Convention on Right of Persons with Disability, this was adopted by United Nations in 2006, and the total changes in Disability Act was accepted by United Nations in 2006. After that, the India also agreed to this, and they assured them that will definitely make changes and rectify this Disability Act. Next, please. The milestones of these acts, as you all know that in 2010, the process of drafting of these mental health bills was started. Then the national and the regional consultations took place. November 13, the Parliamentary Standing Committee report came out. 16 Rajya Sabha and 17 Lok Sabha passes this bill. April 17, the Mental Health Care Act was signed by President, and the rules and regulations, they were declared by central government in May 2018. These are the short milestones of this act. Next, please. The guiding principles for these Mental Health Act is that the basic is a person with mental illness. That was the basic of this act. And all persons have basic human rights, which includes the right to equality, liberty, and dignity. All person must be given autonomy to make choices they consider the best for themselves. Everyone has a right to fulfill participation and inclusion in society, and no person can be discriminated against because they have physical, intellectual, cognitive, and psychological disability. These were the guiding principles of Mental Health Care Act 2017. Next, please. The basic of this act is that this act contains almost 16 chapters and 126 clauses. Its inclusion of patient rights, that is the main, what you will say in Marathi, that is the GABA of this act. It safeguards the persons with mental illness and right to access quality care. The newer options like advanced directives, nominated representatives, etc., given autonomy to person with mental illness, these are the newer options which are available in this act. The decriminalization of suicides that is also there in this act. Pre-treatment for BPL patients, destitutes and homeless is also there in this act, and decentralization of mental health care has given the most importance in this act. Next, please. So now, what is the implementation of Maharashtra? The most awaited question everyone has. So, for the effective implementation of Mental Health Care Services Act 2017, we have taken many actions. The first and the foremost was to establish the Maharashtra State Mental Health Authority. And friends, let me tell you that we have already established the State Mental Health Authority for effective implementation of Mental Health Care Services Act in October 2018. However, we have conducted many meetings during this year, and after expiry of 3 years, again the non-ex officio members of said authority are newly appointed recently, and I hope that the GR will come anytime within next week or so. So the second phase of mental health, State Mental Health Act is going on. The district mental health review boards, they are also in place. Initially, we have started the 8 review boards in Thane, Pune, Nasik, Kolhapur, Aurangabad, Latur, Akola and Nagpur, and they have started functioning also. So this step is also taken in Maharashtra. The mental health review boards, the district judge is a chairperson, and the district mental health review board, we have other non-official and official members as per the act. Next, please. So now the rules and regulations. We have already drafted the rules and regulations for Mental Health Services Act 2017. As in Maharashtra, there are very less psychiatric functionaries. We do not have the healthcare workers, the social workers, the clinical psychologists, which are the qualification which is told in the Act. So accordingly, we prepared our rules and regulation. We have already sent it to central government, but the central government refused us to give any diversion from the rules and regulations they have prepared. And therefore, Maharashtra has to prepare the new rules and regulations according to the central government rules and regulations, and we redrafted it and again sent it to central government for approval on 6th of September 2021, and we are still waiting for their approval. And I hope that within this 1 or 2 months, definitely the central government will give us approval for the draft rules and regulation, and this act will be passed in Maharashtra and will be implemented very soon in Maharashtra. Next, please. But we have not stopped here. Whatever the clauses are mentioned in the Act. We have already started implementing those clauses. So the most important clause in the Mental Health Care Act 17 is right to access mental health care, or I would rather like to say that the decentralized services available in Maharashtra. Friends, you all know that we have 4 regional mental hospitals having more than 5,000 bed capacity. The most important and the oldest hospital which is situated in Pune is 2,540 bed. Thane we have 1850 bed. Nagpur we have 940 and Ratnagiri 365. So all the 4 regional mental hospitals, they are scattered all over Maharashtra and they are in the 4 corners of Maharashtra. We have 10 beds reserved for mental health patients in 34 district hospitals. At the same time, most of these district hospitals now handed over to medical education, and definitely the medical education has a mandatory psychiatry department for their third year students, and therefore they will definitely have a better psychiatry services through these district hospitals. The district mental health program is already implemented in Maharashtra way back in 2014-15, and now we have extended this district mental health program to all our sub-district hospitals and to rural hospitals. We have almost 400 sub-district and rural hospitals in Maharashtra. They are situated in each and every taluk of Maharashtra. So friends, we have not stopped here. The outreach activities through this district mental health program, they are also available. Moreover, we have extended our services at PSC level also, that is primary health center also. Until today, I'm happy to tell you that 1098 PSCs, they are having Manashakti clinic, and weekly they are providing these mental health services to the patients. The PSC Manashakti clinics, they are run by the basic doctors who are trained through NIMHANS and our psychiatry department. Friends, the subcenter is situated at every 5,000 population, and we have a community health officer in place in these subcenters, and through these subcenters, through e-Sanjeevani OPD, we are providing mental health services to the people who are living in the villages. 104 telephonic helpline is also available for all the patients and the community, through which the telephonic helpline is available and anyone can access this telephonic consultation. Next please. The Telemanas. With the help of Government of India, very soon we are going to implement this Telemanas, a centrally sponsored scheme which mental health services will be provided to mental patients and community through telephonic counseling. The scheme is proposed to be started at Regional Psychiatric Hospital, Thane, Pune and Medical College, Aurangabad, and AIIMS Nagpur will function as a mentoring institute for Maharashtra. So, this is also in place. Right to community living, that is another clause in the Mental Health Act, and we are already started implementing this. The halfway homes, they are in place with the help of Social Justice Department, and let me tell you that today almost more than 200 patients from all the 4 mental hospitals who are recovered and who are well settled on treatment are shifted to these halfway home for rehabilitation. There are previous one, please. There are 10 functional daycare centers which are available at the district hospital, and also the rehabilitation centers, the de-addiction centers we are developing in a district like Gadchiroli. Next, please. Yes. We are also implementing right to protection from cruel, inhuman and degrading treatment clause in Maharashtra. The ECT which we are given is always under short GA. The hospital staff is also trained to handle the aggressive patient without harming themselves as well as to the patient. Right to equality and non-discrimination is already implemented in all 4 mental hospitals and wherever the indoor facilities are available. Next, please. And of course, the confidentiality of the mental illness is maintained. Right to personal contacts and communication is also available in all our hospitals, and definitely the right to make complaint is their right, and we are respecting them. Next, please. So, what are the duties of appropriate government? The main thing is that to promote the mental health and preventing programs, all mental health days are celebrated. We are promoting many of the mental health care acts, and for this, the Psychiatry Society is helping us. Recently, we got a program like Gaon Tithe Manasopchar, and the Psychiatry Society, Maharashtra Psychiatry Society has helped us a lot for this program. We are creating the awareness regarding mental health for reducing stigma and associated with the mental illness. We have trained our ashas, maximum ashas, and through these ashas, they are creating awareness at the village level. The appropriate government shall take measures to address human resource requirement of mental health services, and that is the most important. We have already accepted this challenge, and through the program of Center of Excellence, let me tell you that the 3 of our mental hospital, we have already started courses for clinical psychologists, social workers, psychiatry social workers, and psychiatrist nursing. So, and we have got approval for the psychiatry nursing course at Thane and Pune for 2026, and within 8 days we'll be definitely starting these courses in our hospital. Let me also tell you that the 4 seats of MD Psychiatry is also approved for these 2 mental hospitals, that is at Nagpur and at Pune. And with the help of the medical education, we are developing these courses. Next, please. Next, please. Next, please. Yeah. The e-Manas software, which is the most important software where we are going to register all the mental health care field workers and all the functionaries. And yes, we are in the process of developing that, and very soon we'll be getting this e-Manas software active in Maharashtra. Next, please. Yes, so these are the things which Maharashtra is implementing, and let me tell you that there is a hope even when your brain tells you there isn't. Thank you very much. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, madam. Thank you very much. You have given a very good information in this symposium, and I am very thankful that you have given very valuable time for this symposium from your very busy schedule. Thank you very much, madam.
Yes.
Hello. Our next speaker is a gifted child from school days to his medical career, and he is a gold medalist in psychiatry, which I remember very well because I was his examiner. And he is also one of the modern rebels, you can say, who is fighting for justice and welfare of mentally ill patients, and not necessarily only being a psychiatrist, but extremely well versed with law and dignity and rights, human rights issues. So I request him to make his presentation for training for the implementation of MSCA 2017, because he and I also know very well many things can go wrong in the implementation and the blame may come to the act. So let's get the clarification that we don't make mistakes in implementation of the law. Thank you.
Sir, yes, I do remember. And I do remember after the exams we went out and a pretty good time in the evening. That was almost 30 years ago in 1991 when I was doing my MD in Mumbai, and Agashe sir was one of the examiners for my MD. It's been a long time and a long path. I don't have any slides. I think we are all tired of slides. I'm tired of slides. I'm tired of webinars. I'm tired of listening to the same kind of stuff being said all the time. I think we're all in the same boat. I'm not going to bore you with slides, but I'm going to talk a little bit. I've been asked to talk about training on the Mental Health Care Act, and I will do that. But you can't talk about training in isolation without actually talking about the broader aspects of the state's response that it has been for the Mental Health Care Act across the country. First thing I want to ask all of you, how many of you have read the Act? Okay, about half of the people. So training, the first step in training, read the Act. Now that I can't do it for you, and no trainer can do it for you. You'll have to read it. So that's your first step. When you go home, read the Act. You know, we are in the age of Google. If you Google, you'll be able to download a whole copy, the official Gazette copy. You don't need to say, I can't find a copy of the Act. It's available on Google. Why do I say read the Act as the first thing? Is because, ignorance of the law is no defense. You know, if you get into trouble with the law and if you say, oh, but I had not read the Act and I wasn't aware I was supposed to do X, Y, Z or not supposed to do A, B, C, that's not a defense. You know, you can't take that as a defense. Ignorance is not your defense. So saying I haven't read the Act is not going to save you from trouble. So the first thing to do is to read the Act. In terms of, Dr. Taire spoke about the Mental Health Care Act in Maharashtra, and some of the things that I wanted to highlight to people is that the Mental Health Care Act was passed in the Parliament in 2017, but only brought into force in May 2018, which was about 13 months later. So why was it brought into force 13 months later? You know, why was it not brought into force immediately? That's a question we should be asking ourselves, and that's a question we should be asking our state governments. And there is a reason. The law actually says why it was brought into force after a period of time. You know, initially it was supposed to come into force after 9 months, and then the government said, well, we'll give some more time. And the reason to bring the law into force 13 months after it was passed was to give state governments the time to do all the actions that were required to be done under the Mental Health Care Act, which means appoint the Mental Health Authority, get your draft rules, regulations done, you get your mental health review boards done. Okay, now all of this was supposed to have happened by May of 2018. We are now in August of 2022, and even today, many states have not yet appointed their state mental health authorities. In fact, I know that there are at least 5 different PILs going on in different states, in the high courts, which are now now monitoring state governments for their compliance with the state mental health authorities as well as the review boards. For example, and I'll not name many governments, but I mean, this is a judgment. The Goa bench of the Mumbai High Court actually, a woman who has a mental health problem and her sister went to the Goa bench and they live in Goa and said, we want to register an advance directive. However, there is no mental health review board and the law says we should register it with the mental health review board. The government has not appointed a mental health review board. And so the High Court pulled up the Goa government and actually that resulted in the mental health review boards getting appointed. It's a similar situation happening in Bihar, where the Patna High Court is really after the government of Bihar to get their act sorted out in a sense. Something similar happened in Karnataka. So the point is that a lot of the implementation push that is coming at the moment is not coming because we have governments willing to do something. The implementation push is coming because stakeholders largely, and it's very interesting, it's not been NGOs filing these cases in court. It has actually been patients filing these cases in court, which is actually a very good sign. So it's the push is coming from the stakeholders to ensure implementation. The Delhi High Court, for example, a lady went to court because she did not get reimbursed for her treatment for her schizophrenia, and she said, I have health insurance and it's not reimbursed. And the Delhi High Court actually passed an excellent judgment, not only pulling up the insurance company but actually pulling up IRDA, which is the regulator, and insisting that insurance coverage is now mandatory for everybody. So what I'm saying is that a lot of this implementation is happening because people are now kind of using the power of the act to get their rights. The other point that you need to also remember, and I heard Dr. Taide talk about, they're waiting for funds from the central government. The other point that you need to remember, and state governments need to remember, is that, health is a state subject. Health is not a central subject. So the state governments are supposed to spend on mental health. The centrally sponsored schemes and the central grants which come are supposed to be an additional top-up on the state government spending. So, when state governments say, oh, we don't have the resources for it because the center did not give the money, that's actually incorrect, okay? The center is not bound to give the money. When the center gives a top-up money, that's a top-up money. That's not supposed to be the only money you rely on. You are supposed to, as state government, supposed to spend the money from your own resources because health is a state subject. It's not a central subject. And so to say we can't do this because we haven't received funds from the center is not actually is not a correct representation of the situation, is how I would put it. Now that's one thing. The other thing is in terms of training. If you see, as Dr. Taire's slide said, it said duties of the appropriate government, and as you will notice, it says duties of the appropriate government. It doesn't talk about duties of the central government or state government. Appropriate government, and obviously that is the reason, because in different parts of the country, different governments are the ones who have a duty. So, like for example, in Mumbai, for example, healthcare is largely the Mumbai Municipal Corporation's duty and has not been the state government's duty. That's an example of appropriate government. But one of the things that I hear from state governments is, and you heard this too, that we would like to do a lot of training. They have a duty to do training for all health officers, legal officers, even police officers. And you will constantly hear that, well, we would like to do the training, but we don't have resources for it. I mean, that's a reason that you get told frequently. What you don't get told, I think, is the fact that actually the NMHP and the DMHP programs, the central PIPs which are there, which means the center gives out money for those programs, actually have two components built into it. One is financial support for running of the SMHA, and the second is financial support for carrying out training programs on the Mental Health Care Act. Now I know that, and I'm not going to name state governments, but I know there are many state governments which have actually returned this money unutilized. So, on one hand, state governments are saying we don't have the money to do training and we don't have the money to implement it. But on the other hand, when money does come in from the central government, and you say, well, the center is not giving us money, but when the center does give you money for certain things, you actually do not utilize it and send it back. And it's a very typical thing that, we get requests, and Arjun is here, we know he can confirm this. We get requests in the month of March, okay? We want to do some training just now for everybody. Come tomorrow. It's like, hang on, why? Because, 30th of March is year end and funds have to be, we'll have to show non-utilization of funds. And then you say, okay, but Purcha Varshi, let's do this properly. Then nothing, and we say, why don't we do next year's from April, May? You don't hear about them. And I'm sure that we will, like how Ganpati Bappa comes in August, all the state government officials come in March. That is Ganpati Bappa for them. So, that's how it has been. They have the funds. They're supposed to put their own funds, but they're not doing it. When they get the funds from the central government, they're actually not utilizing those funds. And there are state governments which have done a brilliant job, okay? And I have no problems in naming those state governments because, for example, we got a grant from a funder to run a 2-year program to do trainings, Mental Health Act trainings, Mental Health Care Act trainings in different state governments in collaboration with different state governments. And the only state governments which actually agreed to collaborate and do those trainings were Gujarat and Chhattisgarh. Okay, and I don't know the exact numbers, and Arjun will know the numbers, but in Chhattisgarh we trained every single police officers in every district, judges through the Chhattisgarh Judicial Academy, so 700 odd judges, and all of their DMHP and all of their PHC staff were trained in the Mental Health Care Act. Now this was fully funded, so there was no expenses involved for the state government, and I think we covered close to around 10,000 people who were trained in Gujarat and in Chhattisgarh over a 2-year period. But the interesting thing was at that time we actually had money to work with 5 state governments, and we wrote to 5 state governments and only 2 agreed to do it. So money is not always the excuse. What I'm trying to say is that while we keep on saying money nahi hai, paisa nahi hai, paisa hai, the issue is do you have the inclination to do it, and that has really been the challenge. The challenge has not been availability of financial or human resources. The challenge has been a lack of desire or a lack of will to actually do what is necessary under the Mental Health Care Act. And so what is happening is that you'll notice across the country, state governments are getting pushed by courts to do it. And so they will do as little as possible or as limited as possible just to satisfy the courts and get the court off their back, rather than to actually fulfill their duties under the Act. So that's largely the issue. The final point I wanted to make was also about this whole thing about state rules which keep on coming up. I mean I hear this constantly in many states. Oh, we are not able to do this because our state rules have not been approved by the center. That actually is not an accurate representation of what is happening. Okay, if you look at the Act, it says very clearly that the first set of state rules, not the first set of central rules, but the first set of state rules will be drafted by the CMHA and the central government. And state governments only need to go to the central government and get an approval if they want to amend those first set of state rules. Okay, so what it means is that the first set of state rules have already been done. The CMHA has notified those state rules, and so all of the SMHAs and the district boards can start functioning. Okay, and the amendments can get approved or not get approved and take their own time, but there is nothing to stop state governments from the functioning of the SMHA or the review boards. Now again, we've tried explaining this to all the state governments, but somehow there is some kind of a mindset block that unless we get the approval, we can't do anything about it, which is not true. And there are states which have actually got their SMHAs working, even if their approvals have not come through, for example. So Tamil Nadu is a good example, which has got its SMHA CMHA and its district review boards and a homeless policy, everything working in good order without having to wait for any approval from the from central government. There is no need for any approval from the central government. The state rules have been notified by the CMHA and the central government. So, that's not good enough a reason why we are not able to implement the act. The final point I wanted to make was that it's for state governments. I think the challenge for state governments is really, do they seriously wish to take the actions that are necessary under the Mental Health Care Act to implement it and to actually then whatever benefit that it will result for people? That's really the question. I don't think that resources is actually a question. Human resources is also not a question. Okay, I'll give you an example because we work very closely with the state government of Gujarat, for example. The government of Gujarat has now got a psychologist appointed in every district. Okay, so every district and every DMHP that they have and every district hospital has a psychologist who is attached to the psychiatric services, and they just did it. Chhattisgarh has advertised for psychiatrists, and they have difficulty locating psychiatrists, so they've been offering, if any one of you wants to go and work in Chhattisgarh, by the way, they're offering a salary which is huge, okay, 1.75 lakhs a month. If anyone wants to go and work for the DMHP in Chhattisgarh, that's the salary that they're offering. So states are doing innovative things to get over their resource crunch, and it's possible to do that. In terms of disability certificates, for example, if you look at some states, hardly 100 disability certificates might have been issued, and you look at other states which have taken the approach that, for example, in Gujarat, the approach is very clear. They do camps every Sunday at a district headquarters to issue disability certificate. The psychiatrist is there, the surgeon is there, and the district collector is there. All three sitting together. You get examined the same day. You go home in the evening with a disability certificate. And the way they're monitoring that is very simple. There is a census data on disability per district, and basically they're saying, look, if the census has X number of disabled people in this district, then that many number of disability certificates at the minimum should get issued out. So training and implementation are not, the barriers are not real. The barriers are more in the minds of people who are supposed to be implementing that. And training programs can be done. We are happy to conduct. We also conducted some training programs. If some of you are from Bombay, you would remember that when the act was passed, we conducted some training programs with the Bombay Psychiatric Society on the Mental Health Care Act for the members of the Bombay Psychiatric Society. So training is not really the challenge. The challenge has been the inadequate response from the state governments to their responsibilities under the act. I'll stop here. Thank you so much, and thank you for listening to me. And I'm sorry if I sounded too critical. That was not the intention, but just to try and put the facts before you. Bye.
Thank you. I'll just make a comment because I'm going to take a lawful exit, because I have a commitment and an appointment with lawyer. But I welcome speech of Mitra. And you made a very valid point that health is not on concurrent list. So it's not a central government issue. It's a state government issue. But I would like to add, it's neither central government, it's not a state government, it's a very personal issue. And health, one should be responsible for one's own health also, and should not depend on others. If my birth is not by law, my life should not be governed by law. My life should be governed by understanding. Second thing, like you have seen, the bureaucracy is one of the legitimate ways of buying time. Making laws and going to courts in another legitimate way of buying time, which is taken advantage by the law breakers more than the law-abiding persons. So I think implementation has to really take care of these things. Otherwise, it will always remain a subject of panel discussions, symposiums, and academic fields. I think it should exit from that and come into life. Thank you very much.
Is Dr. Suresh Badamat sir. Sir has joined us online. Sir is the head of the Forensic Psychiatry Unit in NIMHANS, Bengaluru. He has notably played an instrumental role in the drafting of the Mental Health Care Act 2017.
Yes, sir. I will invite you for this speech.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Hope I'm audible. Can I get the feedback?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So first I would like to congratulate the organizers because they are doing this program with NMC compliance. That means without pharma. I think this is the first step. The Pune, our BGS Medical College has done an amazing job. I think they have shown the path to IPS that this is the way to go. Without pharma, we should focus more on the education, academics, and now the currently CPD. Congratulations for everyone who have done this amazing job. The next important point I would like to place a disclaimer. Today what I am speaking on the challenges and how to answer these challenges with regard to Mental Health Care Act and also the mental health care services. These are my personal opinion, nothing to do with the organizations which I work or represent. That is basically NIMHANS and National Law School. This is my personal opinion. With this, the first and the foremost challenge is, before pre-COVID I am talking about, the pre-COVID, the number of persons with mental illness was 10%. That is for 140 crore, it is 14 crore, that's it. That is the number we wanted to treat. That is the current National Mental Health Survey, talk about pre-COVID. After COVID, that is the COVID, we are now slowly moving away. What will be the morbidity? The morbidity has increasing. WHO says that already depression and anxiety is increased by 25%. That means whatever we are seeing, 10%, there will be post-pandemic, it will be 2 to 3 times. Exactly 100 years back, there was again a influenza, pan-encephalitis influenza was there. That is basically 100 years back, that is in 1990. 5 years after that, there was one study done by PhD in Netherlands. They said 5-time increase was there at that time. Now we don't know, but slowly the studies are accumulating, which says that because of the post-pandemic loss of livelihood, many people have died, loss of job, and various other things, disruption in the lifestyle. It may increase 2 to 3 times. Let's have a reasonable estimate, twice it increases. That means 20% is the challenge we have. That means it will come around 28 crore we may have to treat. This is estimate, or you can call it as a guesstimate for that at this point of time. With this number, let's understand the treatment gap. The treatment gap says that in India is around 70 to 80%. 70 to 80% means, imagine, we are not out of 100 patients, 80 of them are not on treatment. Only 20 are on treatment if we are lucky. So this is the huge challenge we have. To answer this challenge, we have to come up with a disruptive methodology. That means we cannot go as we are already doing. That means treatment as usual, services as usual will not work. We have to come up with something which is innovative, never been done, and we should have to use various methodology to reach the people. So that should be our mindset at this point of time. Whoever is sitting in the administrative post, even in the IPS administrative post, that is Indian Psychiatric Society, it may be in the State Psychiatric Society, State Mental Health Authority, or a people like me who is sitting in demands, have to come up with this innovative ideology. The planning what we are doing, like only DMH people, will not occur. We have to make a proactive steps. The simple reason is, if you look at the suicide rates, around 1 week back only, the NCRB data 2021 came up. It talks about mind-boggling reported cases. 1,64,033 people death by suicide in 2021. In 2020, it was 1,53,000. That means every year we are increasing by 10 to 12%. This is reported. WHO says that into three times is the death by suicide. Into 20 times are the people who have attempted suicide. That means the numbers we have to achieve are huge number. We need to have a collective efforts. It cannot be individual, patchy work will not achieve anywhere. So the first challenge starts with the political commitment. The political commitment has three important roles, if you ask me. One is expressed commitment, that is by law. We have Mental Health Care Act, we have a Right to Persons with Disability Act, we also have a mental health policy. Express commitment is there. Second comes in budget commitment. That means financial support should be there. The third one is institutional support. Institutional support means it can be private institution, it can be government institution, it can be societal institution like Indian Psychiatric Society, Indian Psychological Society, Clinical Psychological Association, Psychoanalytical Association. Name those institutions should work towards the betterment of the society. It cannot be individual work. That's where the issue comes in. For that, why I am bringing this issue is the problem is human resources. Trained human resources are very less at this point of time. Let's look at the number of psychiatrists in India. Every year we are now come up with 1,000 we are able to add because of the NMC has been very lenient to increase the psychiatry MD students or DNB students totally we are around 1,000 we are able to achieve. But the requirement is huge. We have around 10,000 psychiatrists at this point of time in India. Plus or minus 2,000 or 3,000 depending upon number of people who have migrated, number of people who have come to India, all those we can take into consideration. But the numbers required is huge. Why? Because if you consider 140 crore population in India is there, we have 20% post-pandemic mental health morbidity. If you take, okay, we will take 10%, whatever NHS state study says, we have 14 crore people need to be treated or addressed. So, what should be the good number? The international studies or international, if you want to say India is a developing country or a developed country, we need to stand with the cutting edge US, UK or Canada or maybe Australia. We want to stand with them because we say we are already a developed country and we are already standing in the top 5. That means we should have for every 10,000 population, one psychiatrist, one psychologist, one social worker, one nurse. The 4 pillars should be there for 10,000 population. Why 10,000 population? In 10,000 population, 10% are ill means 1,000 people need to be treated. To treat 1,000 people, every day you see at least one patient for 1 month, 300 need to be seen. And if you don't take leave, every Sunday you are working, then only you'll be seeing 9,000. So for that, we require 1,40,000 psychiatrists, 1,40,000 clinical psychologists, 1,40,000 psychiatric social worker, 1,40,000 nursing, psychiatric nursing. Can we reach this number? Sorry, it is impossible because we are adding only psychiatrists 1,000 per year, clinical psychologists 1,000 per year, psychiatric social worker 1,000 per year. That means we require 130 years from now, provided population of India remains constant, the number of patients remains constant, number of psychiatrists do not die. They don't die, they are in India only. That means 138 years. Think about it. It's not a joke. It's a serious issue. That means what we have to do? We have to come up with task shifting and task sharing. What is this task shifting and task sharing? Simple example I can give you. When India got independence in 1947, we had a very bad maternal mortality rate. The number of gynecologists were very less. So then they thought, can we increase or train DAIs so that the childbirth labor can be done at the village level? A&M training started. Okay, there was opposition, I'm not telling that, but we were successfully, by using a simple methodology, we were able to bring down maternal mortality rate. Same thing we should apply here, that all learned people who are sitting here, who are sitting in various administrative posts, sitting in various society's post should think that we are here to deliver what we are supposed to do as a human being. Because think, the first day when you entered into the medical college, the day when you entered into the medical college, when you asked, somebody asked, why you are joined? I want to serve the people. You ask any medical student who joins today, you ask him why you have joined, they will say, I want to serve the people. But unfortunately, by the 5.5 years end of the MBBS, our education system has removed his ethics from him. Now he says, I want to earn money. We have removed ethics, we have given him education. Unfortunately, this is the status. We have to bring back those ethics. We want people to serve the community. Why I am telling this very important is because even if you provide 1 lakh psychiatrists today by importing from UK, Australia, anywhere, all these people, double degree graduates, want to work in urban area. That means, again, rural area we will not be able to reach. That means we have to come up with ASHA model where we train the person in the community, empower them. I am very passionate about this. Many educated MD psychiatrists, my own Indian Psychiatric Society people, clinical psychology do not agree with me because I am trying to take away their bread and butter. Sorry, I am a public health personnel. I want to see a last person in the last village do not go untreated and he should get medicine. So that is the issue here. So we need to see how we can do this task shifting and task sharing across India so that any person anywhere is there can be treated. So how to address this? Again, leverage digital technology. Yes, of course, telemedicine is there, telepsychiatry is there, but technology is not the answer for human suffering. What we can do is it can redistribute the resources. Whatever the scarcity resources will not be able to be borne by technology. So technology will be adding a challenge, but anyhow, we can use it providing to redistribute. Urban people can to some extent provide services through telemedicine or telepsychiatry. Next one is implementation of Mental Health Care Act, e-Manas, that is basically a platform for transparency so that every person comes to know where the medicine is available, where the medicine is not available, whether the DMHP is working, whether the DMHP psychiatrist is not working, which private institution is admitting a person with mental illness under 89, 90, so the administrator in the state mental authority knows everything. And a corrective measure can be taken. Or else, over a period of time, we will be able to know in which area, if there is a disaster or a climate change, whether the mental illness increases or decreases. So that leveraging technology should be our important, another area we need to address this challenge. But however, as I completely agree with Soumitra Patare, of course, the user groups are coming and asking for their rights. I request more NGOs to be more proactive, go to the court and ask why this law, such as Mental Health Care Act, the rights have been enumerated, why it has not been given. Unless the users start raising voice, none of the government will cater for this. A simple example is, if the child does not cry, mother will not feed. Let's be very clear about this. So user groups has to raise their voice. If they don't raise their voice, let me be very clear that many people will not be able to provide care or maybe services. So what should be the plan? If you look at the WHO's recent mental health resources and also mental health guideline, which the book has been released recently, that clearly talked about very important thing. That means lifetime approach treatment plan should be started. That is womb to tomb. That means if we want to reach the perinatal, and unfortunately to say this, I am seeing in our own Bangalore, in the past 1 month, 3 educated women under depression murdered their children. It is available online. You can see that. And they are going through a tremendous stress. Unfortunate, as a society, we are not providing support to the women who are taking care of the children. So we need to address and talk to the gynecologist. Can we train them in identifying depression? Can we address this during labor? Immediately when the child comes, when the child is brought to the pediatrician, can the pediatrician ask certain questions to the mother? Simple 1 or 2 questions. These are called as vital signs. What we say, pulse, BP, you can ask one, how are you? How is your mood? How is your, whether you are happy, are you depressed? Simple questions can be asked. Can we identify those so that we can bring them for treatment? Can we decrease the suicide? Can we train pediatrician? Can we train, like many of our children are now going towards the school, can we train the school teachers in identifying and referring? And can we identify many counselors are available? You can see counselors, they are cut across the HIV, NCDC, even they are available even in POXO cases where there are counselors there. Can we train them? Can we use women and child development? We have to be inclusive. We cannot say like psychiatry, we will be very restricted. We would like to only give medicine. That is not going to help. We have to come up with what I'm saying. We should not do this incremental training. We have to come up with a disruptive methodology to reach the last person in the last village, should not go without treatment. That should be the goal. That is the service you have done to be a doctor, that you have done it. So with these few words, I thank the organizers and I again congratulate the organizers to come up with NMC compliant conference. Thank you one and all. And if I hurt somebody, sorry, but this is, I am very passionate about it. I will continue to do this, whatever happens. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Suresh Badamat. Very good speech you have given. You have in detail discussed what are the challenges before the implementation of this act and how to overcome it. A very important challenge you have mentioned, the political commitment. So unless and until there is a political will, the governments will not implement it very stringently and in toto, whatever act is there. Thank you very much again.
It has been informed that Dr. Raju is not there in the participant group. Maybe he has been stranded somewhere in the airport. We'll wait for him. I shall give SMS to him. And in the meantime, I would like to invite Mr. Arjun Kapoor to speak on legal issues related to implementation of MHA. Please.
Hello. Yeah. Hi, good afternoon. Actually, Dr. Pathare has covered most of the points that I had to address, so I really don't know what to talk about, but I'm going to take a few minutes to touch upon some of the legal aspects around the Mental Health Care Act, which I think are worthy of sort of sharing and for our general knowledge and awareness. So one of the criticisms around the Mental Health Care Act has been that I've come across has been that where has this law come from? You know, that it is a Western construct, it doesn't fit within India's context. Just to address this criticism, I think one of the things that we need to first realize is that, first of all, India has had a long history of mental health legislation starting from the earliest 19th century, 1800s, from the time that the British came in. So really the history of mental health legislation in India is the history of colonialism, right? And with the earliest laws in the mid 1800s all the way to 2017 when the Mental Health Care Act was enacted, we've taken about 160 years to overcome that colonial legacy, right? One of the most important drivers of the implementation of this law was a very important international development in 2006, which was the adoption of the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, right? This was a convention which was adopted by the international community with the idea of recognizing, protecting and promoting the rights of persons with disabilities, including persons with mental illness. Because what history had shown was that existing international laws and legislations had failed miserably to protect the rights of persons with disabilities. And hence there was this international movement to actually bring about a new convention which recognized the rights of persons with disabilities and persons with mental illness. Now, this convention was radical because it, first of all, it completely debunked the medical model of disability and replaced it with the social model of disability, which essentially said that disability isn't something which arises from the human body, right? An impairment might rest in a person, it might reside in a person, but a disability arises when the impairment interacts with social, environmental factors which prevent that person from participating on an equal basis with others, right? Now, this was a radical change that the UN Convention brought about, because what it meant was that we had to move away from an approach which excessively medicalized individuals, specifically persons with mental illness, and started focusing on all those barriers in the environment or barriers which were attitudinal, which were preventing persons with mental illness from accessing the same rights as any other person in society. Now, the interesting thing is that India ratified this convention in 2006, which meant that India committed to the UN and the international community that we will amend our existing laws and policies in compliance with the UN CRPD's provisions, right? And the CRPD's provisions, if some of you are aware, are actually lay down a gold standard for how persons with mental illness need to be treated and cared for, including other persons with disabilities. And two of the most important principles here are, one is the principle of legal capacity, right? Now, what does the principle of legal capacity say? It says that all human beings, irrespective of their status or disability, have rights, and they also have the right to exercise those rights or make choices or personal decisions which affect their own lives. So the CRPD said is that the first thing we have to do is recognize that all persons with disabilities have legal capacity and they have the right to make their own decisions. The second thing that the CRPD also does is that it recognizes that disability is a part of human diversity, right? You will always have human beings with different skills, different talents, different qualities, and different decision-making abilities. But the idea of legal capacity means that if today I am a person with mental illness, and because of that severe illness, I might have impaired decision-making abilities, I still have the right to make my own decisions regarding my own mental health care and treatment or any other aspect of my life, whether it's to get married, whether it's to have a family, whether it's to enter into a contract, whether it's to buy or sell property, so on and so forth. I have the right to exercise my own legal decisions with the support that I need to be able to make those decisions. Right? So the CRPD recognizes that human beings might have impaired decision-making abilities, and in the context of mental illness, because of severe mental illnesses, there might be individuals who might have impaired decision-making abilities, but if they are provided the right kind of support, then they can exercise their own capacity to make those decisions and exercise their legal capacity and autonomy, right? So that's the context from which the MHCA, within which the MHCA was actually enacted, because once in 2007 when we ratified this, we had an obligation to amend our existing laws in compliance with the CRPD, and that's how the MHCA 2017 came about. The second important sort of aspect about this is that if you're familiar with the 1987 Act, what was one of the biggest criticism of this law? The biggest criticism was that it was too administrative, it focused on too many administrative procedures, and it gave a lot of power to the judiciary, to judicial magistrates to decide whether a person should be admitted into a mental health establishment or not. Now, this, according to me, was a historical anomaly, because why would you provide the judiciary with so many powers to decide the fate of a person with mental illness when they have absolutely no training or qualification in making those kinds of determinations, right? So interestingly, one of the most important aspects of the 2017 Act was that it has now completely removed or banned the idea of reception orders, right? Which is, what was a reception order? That a magistrate would pass a reception order, and only on the basis of that would a mental health professional be able to admit a patient for long stay in that establishment. The 2017 Act has completely done away with the idea of reception orders. What does this mean? This means that mental health professionals now have all the power and the responsibility to ensure admissions, treatment, and discharge in mental health establishments, right? So one of the criticisms that psychiatrists or the mental health professional community don't have any powers under this law is actually completely misplaced, right? It's an inaccurate representation, because on the contrary, they have been given all the powers to ensure admissions, treatment and discharge of mental health of persons with mental illness. However, there is a qualification to this, and if some of you have read the Mental Health Care Act and seen the admission procedures, you'll see that there are certain criteria and safeguards which are in place to determine who can be admitted for what duration or what period in a mental health establishment, right? Now, for instance, some of these criteria are that a person must have a severe mental illness, they must lack capacity to make their own decisions, they must require almost 100% support, and they should either be at risk of harm to themselves, risk of harm to somebody else, or that they must not be able to take care of themselves, right? Now, I think it's important to understand that these qualifications actually have constitutional significance, right? If you are familiar with our constitution, you will find that the constitution says that any law which deprives the liberty of a human being has to meet certain safeguards, right? The law cannot be arbitrary. It cannot be irrational. It has to be proportionate, right? Now, these are constitutional safeguards which are enshrined in Article 14, Article 21 of the Constitution, which ensure that any person's liberty, including a person with mental illness, their liberty cannot be violated on any flimsy grounds, right? There has to be a rational, there has to be a proportionate reason, and there has to be a certain procedure which is put into place, right? So if you look at the Mental Health Care Act, it very clearly lays down those set of safeguards for mental health professionals to ensure that treatment, admissions or discharges are not happening on an arbitrary basis, and that there is a certain procedure to sort of depriving a person's liberty, especially when they have a severe mental illness. Now, the law also provides for a certain institutional mechanism to ensure this, right? So you have the mental health review boards, which Dr. Pathar has already spoken about, which are essentially the most important regulatory body under the Mental Health Care Act today. Because the MHRBs are responsible for ensuring that every admission, every bit of treatment and discharge is taking place in accordance with the Mental Health Care Act, that it is not violating the rights of persons with mental illness. Now, before the MHRBs, one would have the question that why would you want to put in place such an elaborate bureaucratic mechanism? Now, this is something which is actually playing to the benefit of mental health professionals themselves. Because had the MHRBs not been there, you would be dragged to the courts for every single rights violation or every single decision which would be challenged by a person or their family members. So the MHRBs are actually playing a very important role, or have to play a very important role, because like we've already heard, most states don't have functional MHRBs in place, and that's the other issue from an implementation and a legal point of view as well, because you can't enforce the provisions of this law until you actually have the regulatory bodies which are meant to be regulating and monitoring rights violations. So the other point that I wanted to make was, of course, Dr. Pathar has already touched upon this, is the role of the courts. Now, in a sense, the lack of implementation or the failure of implementation of the Mental Health Care Act is no different a story from any other rights-based legislations in India, right? So if you look at the Right to Education Act, you look at the National Rural Employment Guarantee Act, you look at the Forest Rights Act, you will find that all of them have had a similar trajectory of poor implementation, right? So in that sense, the MHC is no different. But what we've really seen in the last 3 years is the courts playing a very important role in actually taking up this role of monitoring implementation. And the courts have done this in 3 different ways. The first is, of course, to monitor state government. So you have PILs in the Supreme Court. There's the Gaurav Bansal versus Dinesh Kumar case, which has been going on for quite a while now, where the Supreme Court has been monitoring state governments to see whether they've actually been implementing the provisions or not. The Supreme Court has also issued directions to state governments to put in place rehabilitation homes, right? Because what we've also been noticing in many states is that persons with mental illness are actually being shifted to beggars' homes, or beggars' homes have been are being refurnished as rehabilitation homes, which is in complete violation of the Mental Health Care Act. And this is also a factor which is preventing hospitals today from discharging patients, discharging patients who've been in long stay admissions because there are no rehabilitation facilities to send them to, right? So there is a very interesting deadlock which has happened where the Mental Health Care Act is saying that if you don't require treatment, then you should be discharged and sent to a rehabilitation home. But hospitals, on the other hand, are saying that there are no rehabilitation homes in the first place, so where are we going to send our patients, right? So it's a difficult deadlock, and I think the only way forward is for the psychiatric community to be advocating with state governments to ensure that some of these facilities are actually put into place, because both the governments and the mental health professional community will end up violating the provisions of the Mental Health Care Act otherwise. I think the second place where the courts have been active is again in terms of implementing certain provisions of the law. So we also discussed the Delhi High Court's judgment on medical insurance, where the Delhi High Court actually admonished the Insurance Regulatory and Development Authority, saying that it's not fulfilling its statutory role to ensure that insurance companies must comply with Section 21 of the law, which says that physical illness and mental illness both should get medical insurance on the same basis, right? So you can't discriminate against a person with mental illness in providing them medical insurance because they have a mental illness. You have to provide them the same kind of insurance policies that you're actually providing to persons with physical illness. But we are now seeing on the ground that a lot of insurance companies, even though that they're covering mental illness, they're having differential terms, right? Differential forms of policy coverage where people with mental illness are getting lesser benefits than a person with physical illness. In fact, very interestingly, if you look at the IRDA's 2020 guidelines on standardization of health insurance policies, the IRDA's policy itself has alcoholism and substance abuse as a exclusion from insurance policies, right? So the IRDA's own guidelines are flouting the rules of the Mental Health Care Act, where it's very clear that you cannot, substance abuse and alcoholism and drug abuse cannot be, because they are considered as mental illnesses, they cannot be excluded from health insurance policies. You're also seeing health insurance policies which exclude attempted suicide, treatment for attempted suicide from the policies, whereas the Mental Health Care Act has very clearly, first of all, decriminalized suicide, attempt to suicide, if on the presumption that any attempt is because of severe stress, and it has also put obligations on the central and state governments to ensure that every person who has attempted suicide is given the right kind of treatment and rehabilitation and care, right? So that's the interesting thing around compliance with the right to medical insurance under the Mental Health Care Act, and the Delhi High Court has given a very progressive judgment on this. The third final area where the courts have been very active in engaging with the Mental Health Care Act, interestingly, is for the recognition of other rights under the Indian Constitution. So there are two examples here which I'd like to give. The first is the decriminalization of homosexuality. So if you're aware of the Navtej Johar judgment of 2018 by the Supreme Court, one of the arguments that the court relied on to decriminalize homosexuality was the provisions of the Mental Health Care Act, where the Act very clearly says that the right, no person with mental illness can be discriminated on the basis of sexual orientation or gender, right? And the Act also lays down the guidelines on the basis of which persons with mental illness can be diagnosed with a mental illness, which is only in accordance with medical standards approved by the central and state governments, right? Which is the ICD or the DSM. So the court actually relied on the provisions of the MHCA to decriminalize homosexuality. The second example, which might also be relevant for some of you, was the legalization of passive euthanasia. So if you're aware, the Supreme Court in 2018 has legalized passive euthanasia for people who have a terminal illness, are on life support, and have no chance of recovery, right? Now the Supreme Court, again, in that case, relied on the provisions of advance directives under the Mental Health Care Act. And advance directives has been another controversial issue under the Mental Health Care Act. But what the Supreme Court essentially said was it analyzed the provisions of advance directives under the MHCA, and it said that the same principle, the same tool has to be used for persons who are having a terminal illness and might not have the capacity to write a living declaration for passive euthanasia in case they are on life support, right? So now you're also seeing the courts relying on the MHCA's provisions to recognize other constitutional rights for people. So I'm going to stop at this. I hope I've been able to give you some sort of flavor of some of the legal issues involved with the MHCA 2017, in addition to what Dr. Pathare has already said. And also just wanted to do a small plug-in. In case you've not read the Mental Health Care Act, or you find that it's too tedious or difficult to read, the Center has developed an app called the MHCA 2017 app, which is a free of cost app which you can download now from Play Store, or if you have an Apple phone, from Apple Store. And this app basically simplifies the provisions of the Mental Health Care Act for service users, for caregivers and mental health professionals. So in case you find it too tedious to read all 126 provisions, download the app, have a look at it. It's very simple and easy to understand, and it also has some very interesting other features which might be useful for you as mental health professionals. So I'm going to end over here. Thank you very much for listening.
Not joining us.
Okay. Dr. Raju, President of IPS, just 10 minutes ago told that he will be joining, but now he has been busy in another session. I think we may not be able to extend it beyond that session. His topic was IPS initiatives on a Mental Health Care Act. And before we proceed on further questions, I shall request Brigadier M.S. B.K. Raju, past President of Indian Psychiatric Society, to comment something about the IPS stand on this and status of the dispute that we are having in Bombay High Court, and besides give his comments, then we'll proceed on to further comments. Brigadier Raju sir, please.